Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Let's talk about 3 more movies. The Host is the 3rd feature film from director Bong Joon-ho, and a film I sadly overlooked in his catalog. I'm just now getting into him. For some reason, he's just not a filmmaker that I got into for no particular reason, but now I really enjoy his films, now that I've seen them. And The Host is no different. This is his take on a monster movie. As the movie begins, we're introduced to a family who happens to be working together at a food stand when a monster attacks. And that monster abducts and takes underwater the youngest of their family, so the entire movie is the 4 remaining family members out to find the daughter. Relatively low budget. The special effects look really good, except for certain shots, they don't look as convincing, but for the most part, for as low budget as this movie is, it looks really good. And this is not a monster movie that tries to hide its monster in plain sight. You see all of it, a lot. But I like this monster. It has an interesting way of moving from place to place, which is not something I've seen in a movie before. And it also has an interesting feeding schedule that you learn throughout the film, which is unlike a lot of monsters in these kind of movies. The feeding schedule is what made me think, well, they thought about this monster a little bit and its motivations. But a lot of these movies have the family working together throughout its running time to find the other family member or defeat the monster. And while this is true for most of its running time, the movie also takes opportunities to sideline certain characters. So they all have to work together as a family unit, but there are times where each individual member has to use their individual skills to get things done because the other members of the family are incapacitated in some way. And I thought that was really interesting. I thought it was interesting also that while being a monster movie and also being an abducted kid movie, the movie has a sense of humor to it. And you get this with Bong Joon-ho's movies. They have a certain comedy aspect that is unexpected yet necessary within the storytelling that he's trying to do. These characters, while trying to obtain a goal, also are family members who bicker and can make each other laugh at times, even in the most dire of circumstances. And this movie, more than the other 2 I've seen of his filmography, seems to be less about the class structure of working class people and more about a country versus another country, if you will. It's not an antagonistic relationship, but Korea is definitely the good guys, and America is definitely the country that has other motives. Bong Joon-ho has gone on record saying this is not an anti-American movie, but the Americans are definitely the foils to any success the Koreans might have. But while this movie has its genesis in the world of a Godzilla-type creature, where it's a offshoot of human errors, this movie is mostly about a family trying to come together to reach a goal and the monster that stands in their way. I thought it was a very solidly built, well-made action monster movie. One of my favorite in his catalog so far. He hasn't made that many movies. They're basically all favorites at this point. Bill and Ted Face the Music is the long-awaited sequel to Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. In the time since the events of Bogus Journey, Bill and Ted have been trying to write the song that will unite the world, but have failed to do so and have done so with diminishing returns. As we hear, they are performing to about 40 people, all of which are there for Taco Tuesday. But time is running out for them to write this song, so Bill and Ted have the genius idea to go forward in time to steal the song from themselves so they could write it in present day and save the world. All the while, their daughters are going back in time to put together a band that will perform the song. And hilarity ensues. This movie is funny to me because the first film, Excellent Adventure, is very much a product of the late 80s, and with only a 2-year difference between 1989 and 1991 where Bogus Journey came out, Bogus Journey is very, very 90s. And this movie very much looks like a movie that was made in 2020, so probably in 20 years, this movie will seem very retro also. They are three films that very much exist in the time they were made, and it's all the best for it. So when I think about this movie never quite reaches the heights of Excellent Adventure, but it's definitely on par with, if not a little better than, Bogus Journey. And I have seen the first two films in this series a lot. And I've probably seen Bogus Journey more than I've seen Excellent Adventure. So I can basically say that this movie is on par with Bogus Journey, but is a different type of film from the first two. In the first two films, Bill and Ted are supremely confident in their abilities, even given their deficiencies, which are obvious. But over time, it's obvious that Bill and Ted have become kind of road weary. They failed quite a bit and now are kind of at the end of their rope. And part of that from the actors are played as age, and part of that is played from failure. They are confronted with the enormity of their situation and don't know what to do. But they have this one string of hope, and they ride it to the end. And while the Bill and Ted that we meet at the first of this movie don't necessarily seem like the Bill and Ted that we know and love, they come back as the movie goes along. And in that way, it is a nuanced and fun performance from both Winter and Reeves. But mostly, it's just fun to play in the sandbox again. A lot of knowing references to Rufus, who was played by the late, great George Carlin. This is a world that I enjoy with characters I enjoy that are not mean-spirited. They are nice people at their core, if misguided. So much comedy these days can be mean-spirited that it is fun to play with a group of people that only have humanity's best interest at heart. I enjoyed the film, even though never reaches the heights of the originals. It is still a entertaining, fun time. It's an excellent time. That was more Duckman's son than Keanu Reeves. Nightmares in Red, White, and Blue is a documentary film about the horror movie industry in the United States from the start of filmmaking to today. And by today, I mean that this movie was made more than 10 years ago and things have continued to evolve since then. So it's not exactly up to date, but it's pretty good. Just like the documentary film that we saw about Hitchcock's shower scene a few episodes back, this movie does an excellent job of putting horror movies in context of world events. I've always said that the horror genre, more than any other genre, is affected by world events, and that is because world events tend to terrorize us. And horror films have to surpass that and stay ahead of that curve. And this movie does a good job going decade by decade what was happening in the world and how horror reacted to it. Horror tends to ebb and flow more than any other genre too, and latches onto genre trends more than any other genre. So what may be successful will soon have 10 to 20 knockoffs. And this is all pushed by world events. What scares you after witnessing the atrocities of the Holocaust is different than what might have scared you before it. For example, this movie does a very good job of laying out how the effects of 9/11 changed horror and what scares us and what audiences wanted. And more than any other singular event in my lifetime changed how the horror genre approached scares. The one downside I will say about this film is that it is very gruesome in that it shows a lot of the blood and guts from the horror movies that it's talking about. So if you're very sensitive to spoilers, you don't want to see things spoiled for you, this might not be the movie for you because it does go in depth and into a lot of the kills in these movies. But if you don't care about that, if horror movies are just fun anyway and you don't care seeing how they die before they die, then it's a good informational documentary about a genre that evolves over time, more so than any other genre. And that is it for this episode. Have you guys seen any of these movies? I will see you down in comments, and I will see you on the next episode of 366 2020. I don't know if I'm going to make it.
Bye.